Joining us now on the phone is staff writer for InsideTheStar.com and Cowboys Nation, RJ Ochoa. RJ, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I just picked up some Chick-fil-A, so life is pretty great for me right now.
You mean to tell me you didn't go to Whataburger? What is this?
Well, Whataburger is kind of a 3-night a deal for me every week. So I've got a solid rotation that I go through, and Wednesday's a Chick-fil-A day. So that's how it works.
All right, well, no matter where you go, we're glad you enjoyed some lunch. Hopefully gets you in the right mood to debate some quarterbacks here for the Dallas Cowboys. And, let's just start with this before we really get into the debate and what everybody tuned in for. First, let's just spend a few minutes before we get to the draft on some Cowboys free agents. And, obviously that's what they're going to have to deal with before the draft. What's your free agency outlook for this team as far as, some names that you think they need to re-sign, some names you think they will re-sign, and, what do you think the Cowboys' main objectives should be for this offseason when it comes to the free agents that they have, Greg Hardy being one of those names, Morris Claiborne as well?
Well, I think we all saw this past season that there is an elite defense, underneath the terrible quarterback play that we saw. And, they kept us in a lot of games. You look at the Seahawks game, the Patriots game, the Packers game. This defense kept us in there with Matt Castle at quarterback, and that's a really, really tough thing to do. So for me, it's about shoring up that side of the ball and keeping everything that we can in place. And I feel like there's just this line that people are on one side of when it comes to this subject, but I'm a big proponent for bringing Greg Hardy back. And I know Jeremy Mincey might not agree with me, but he's just too talented. And, he's a year back into football playing form. I think it's understandable that he would regress a little from how we saw him in 2013 coming off of a year-long sabbatical. But Greg Hardy is the number one priority for me. And at this point, in terms of the off-the-field situation, for me, we're already in this. To let him go now would be an admission that we were wrong, an admission that we should have never done this, and I feel like it would only, magnify the situation that it's been. I feel like, it's been a long time since everything. I think people are kind of, moving on to new subjects. So I really want Greg Hardy back. In terms of the secondary, it's so suspect. I want Orlando Scandrick back more than anything. I want him to get healthy. But I think it's a coin flip between Brandon Carr and Morris Claiborne. I think you have to bring back one of them, because to let them both walk, all of a sudden your best corner and pretty much your only corner, if you're assuming Byron Jones is playing safety, is coming off of a torn ACL. And, that's it. Your depth is really, really weak. And so I think you have to bring back one of those guys. I don't know exactly who I want it to be at this point. I think I'm probably leaning Claiborne just because the talent's there, you have to believe. It's just, waiting to come out. But those are my two biggest guys, is get somebody in the secondary and re-sign Greg Hardy.
Yeah, I definitely want to see Hardy come back because, you'll remember as well as I did this entire offseason, how much fun we had with interacting with members of Cowboys Nation and just enjoying the prospect of how good this defensive line had the potential to be. There was the hashtag sacks coming and, hashtag, coming to a backfield near you and all that stuff. And
exactly.
Even with Greg Hardy, this defensive front disappointed for the better part of 2015. So if you lose a guy like Hardy, suddenly you have a defensive front that has become a lot less talented, trying to support a secondary that, like you said, is probably, no matter what, going to be thin, depth-wise, and is still going to have some pieces that are, anything but exceptional corners. So Greg Hardy has to be a priority for the Cowboys, and then the secondary, of course, has always been an issue these past few years, and they got to see where they can go from there, either getting a guy like Claiborne or Carr back in here, or, moving around Byron Jones, or even addressing that secondary as high as the fourth overall pick. So let's move into discussing that fourth overall pick, and I don't really know how to ask it any much more simpler than this. You're the guest, so give us your case for why the Dallas Cowboys should not take a quarterback with the fourth overall pick in the 2016 NFL Draft.
Well, for me, there are 21 other starters on a given football team outside of the quarterback. And so, I'm not 1,000,000% against a quarterback. I mean, if your guy is there, that's fine. And so I'm just against tunnel vision on a quarterback and dismissing any other opportunity. I know that there are some prospects in this year's draft class that a lot of people are in love with, and obviously the Cowboys, you guys were talking about before I came on, how they're going to coach up Carson Wentz in the Senior Bowl, and there's a big opportunity to fall in love with the idea of that. But I also don't totally subscribe to the fact that they're win now. I feel like every NFL team is win now. But the Cowboys know that they have a window of time with certain personnel, primarily Tony Romo, that it's closing on them. And that exists for every player, for what it's worth. It's just closing more rapidly with Tony Romo. And so I'm not a proponent of, going all in on 2016 because that's irresponsible to the future of the franchise. I mean, you want to build a team that's going to be sustainable for a long time. But I mean, in a perfect world, Sean, I mean, you're planning on Tony Romo playing, right? If everything goes right, that's what happens, right, in 2016?
I mean, you hope to get 16 games out of him, but realistically, you're hoping for, 14, and then you pray that you get the last 2 or so, and then, even if he does go 16, you're hoping for a playoff push after that. So, yes, right. You think you have that stability at the QB position, but you never know what's going to happen.
Right, and I just feel like drafting a quarterback 4th overall is starting your year with a contingency plan. And contingency plans are necessary, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that is your direct line of thinking on things. And so whether you're bringing in a guy like Laquan Treadwell to help Tony Romo, or you bring in a guy like Jalen Ramsey, like you're saying, to show up the secondary, I think that improves the team now. And that's what I really want more than anything. I want immediate impact and sustainable success. I'm not saying that Connor Cook or any of the other deeper quarterbacks in this draft are franchise guys. But, I think it was Nick wrote a post on Into the Start today about how fluky quarterbacks are when you draft them, how likely it is that you hit on them and you find a franchise guy. And so, but that risk does exist with every player.
Don't they have to do that at some point, though? I mean, the Dallas Cowboys will not have Tony Romo forever. They need, at some point, every team either has to draft or get a quarterback in free agency that they feel is their franchise, and then if not, it sets you back. But it's something you have to do at some point, and at number 4 overall, you're minimizing the risk of trying to do it now.
I totally agree that you have to do it at some point. Every team does. I mean, every player retires or is let go at a certain point. But, you said minimizing risk. Risk exists for any player that you draft at any position. The Cowboys have had a lot of success in the last few years, with the exception of Morris Claiborne, who we talked about, in the first round. So, they have a decent track record at finding guys who are going to contribute, to a great length in the first round. But, I mean, if you miss on Laquan Treadwell, that sucks. If you miss on Jalen Ramsey, that sucks. If you miss on Myles Jack, that sucks. And, yeah, you are without the quarterback. And if you miss on those guys and Jared Goff or whoever turns out to be a franchise guy, then, yeah, you're sitting here in 5 years thinking, man, we let this opportunity slip through our fingers. But what if you take Jared Goff and so you are passing on those guys and he ends up not being anything anyway? I mean, the risk exists there, but you're not only having the equal risk that you have with every other player, you're also jeopardizing this season. I mean, when, the risk with Treadwell or anybody else is a risk, but you have the opportunity to enhance the year of 2016. I don't think that you can start off your year thinking that Tony Romo isn't going to play, a long time. And, I mean, there's a lot of data that shows he won't. But we were all, I assume, you were against taking Johnny 2 years ago. And It was for the same exact reasons. And granted, Tony has had some health issues come up since then. But I feel like it's a similar situation. And with a top 4 pick, you just have to get an impact. You can't miss on that pick, is my point. And a quarterback really potentially jeopardizes, something that's going to ripple down into the next 5-6 years.
But I think what you're looking at is, first of all, let's preface this a bit by saying I don't want him to just take any quarterback. Really, the only quarterback that I would want at number 4 would not even be Carson Wentz. It's really just Jared Goff that we're talking about. So let's focus this in on Goff. if he's there on the board, and I think most of the consensus is that pretty much every team is going to have him rated as a pro-ready, potential franchise stud, superstar quarterback. With the exception of maybe one or two teams, let's say two teams, so that's 30 teams in a 32-team league that are going to say that this guy is a franchise quarterback, and you can bring him into Dallas with the luxury of having him sit behind Romo for a few years, not having to start right away. I mean, that's a luxury that no team ever gets. I don't think Goff is automatically this guy that's going to dominate from year one should he go to a team where he has to start right away. I do think there's going to be a bit of a learning curve for him. So I think Dallas would be a great fit in terms of, the talent is certainly there by far, and then he can develop those skills, learning from a guy like Romo before he exits, and make that transition a little bit seamless.
I agree, but I disagree that it's a luxury because it's not this bonus pick that you have in the first round. If it were the case, if we just got an extra first-round draft pick in the top 4, if we could take 2 guys there, then absolutely, let's take Jared Goff. But
so you're saying wait to draft a quarterback until he has to start in day one, pretty much?
No, I'm not saying that either. I mean, there are some veteran guys that I think that can come in and be bridge-type quarterbacks now, but I completely agree. You can't leave the war room after the 2016 NFL draft without some young prospect. Whether you believe he's a franchise guy or not, you have to have some guy because the guys on the roster right now are not going to get it done. I mean, I think even like the Connor Cooks of the world can compete with Kellen Moore. So you have to get somebody there just for the sake of competition.
Well, if you bring in a guy that you don't feel is the franchise, then what's the point? I mean, the quarterback position is a position where you either get a franchise guy or you don't. And there's really not a whole lot of need on a team for a brand new, at least on this Cowboys team, there's not a lot of need for a brand new backup quarterback that's not any good. We've already seen that.
Well, Sean, I see what you're saying.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, but I also see what he's saying. Why pass up on that impact player at 4? And he's kind of swaying my opinion because he's right. It doesn't make sense to draft a guy at 4 that you're hoping doesn't play for 4 years.
Yeah, and
if
you're investing in the future.
I understand, but you can get that later.
You hope not to be picking this high ever again. You want to, no team wants the 4th overall pick. The 4th overall pick means you had a terrible season. And I think, RJ, you've been following the Cowboys for a few more years than I have. I can hands down say that 2015 was the worst season I've had to sit through as a fan. That was miserable in every way. That was terrible. And the Cowboys,
since the Quincy Carter days.
Yeah, and the Cowboys should not expect fans to have to deal with that ever again. So if that means getting a quarterback at number 4 so we can watch him play instead of watching Brandon Weeden, I'm all for it.
I just feel like, because this is a really similar situation to me for to the 2010 season. And if you look at Romo's injury, record or whatever, yeah, he missed the majority of the 2015 season. He missed 1 game in 2014, and he missed 1 game in 2013. I'm pretty sure he played every game in 2011 and 2012. So he breaks his collarbone in 2010. So at the time, you can argue a similar, thing to right now. Okay, this guy's fragile. We have to get, another guy in here. So 2011, what do? They bring in Tyron Smith. They bring in a guy to aid Tony Romo because they're planning on him playing a little bit more time. And what does he do? He becomes the best left tackle in the game, and he immediately makes Tony better. I mean, I just feel like every team in the first round is going to take a step forward in 2016, like they did in 2011. But if we hadn't taken Tyron Smith, like if we take a quarterback now, we're taking a step sideways immediately. Like we are immediately less better than every other team in theory, because obviously not every pick is going to turn out to be, an all-pro guy or whatever. But in theory, you are immediately less better than every other team. And you're saying, you know what, our team is good enough to overcome that deficit. You're imposing that deficit on yourself for the 2016 season while, yes, potentially investing in a solid future. But that's such an unknown now. It's such an inordinately high risk and an unnecessary risk to take when you're planning and hoping, and building everything around the notion that Tony is going to play a majority of the 2016 season.
Well, you look around this team, what other positions, jump out to you and say, that's the position that we need to go with 4th overall. Obviously, Pro Football Focus put out their offensive line rankings today. For the second straight year, the Cowboys were the best offensive line in both pass blocking and run blocking. So obviously, there's not much needed to be addressed there. Running back will be addressed at some point in this draft, but not at 4th overall. Wide receiver is an option, of course. I'll let you talk about Treadwell in a second. And then you shift over to the defensive side of the ball. The defensive line could use potentially a few more pieces and such, but you have two guys in the middle, and David Irvin and Tyrone Crawford that can dominate. You had DeMarcus Lawrence coming on. Hopefully you get Greg Hardy, you get Randy Gregory. So, maybe adding a 6th or 7th round player there is really all you're looking at as far as what you need to do in the defensive line. The linebacker positions are pretty much all solidified. And then you have the secondary, which I'll be the first to admit, even though I want a quarterback, is not, is a suspect secondary. This is not a championship secondary by any stretch, but I don't see a defensive back worthy of picking at 4th overall unless maybe you're talking about Jalen Ramsey. So taking those 3 players into account here, you have Jared Goff, Treadwell, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss, Raquan Treadwell, and who was the last one I said? Ramsey, and Jalen Ramsey out of Florida State. So in your scenario, we're saying that they don't draft Goff. Are you looking at a guy like Treadwell? Are you looking at a guy like Ramsey? Or who else do you have on your radar at number 4 that you personally want?
Well, I don't know that it's addressing a spot on your roster that's weak. I mean, but that's not my mentality on this whole thing. My mentality is addressing some player here that you're taking with the 4th overall pick that's going to make an impact.
So you're talking about best available?
And Jared Goff is likely that if he's there, he's likely the best player available.
But I'm talking best player with the chance to make the best impact immediately. I mean, obviously you want this player to play well for 15-ish years. But I'm talking about the best player that's going to make the best impact right now. And a lot of things depend on free agency and how that goes, obviously. But, you said this isn't a championship secondary. I agree with that. I also wouldn't say it's a championship linebacking core. I mean, you've got Sean Lee, who, when healthy, and that's another thing. I mean, Sean Lee has a worse injury record than Tony. So you could argue that need is more pressing because Rolando McClain is likely to walk. Damian Wilson, we haven't heard from since training camp of last year. Kyle Wilber's the free agent. I mean, outside of that, who, inspires confidence in you that the middle of that defense is going to be able to compete with other teams who do bring in first-round talent and are going to get better in the offseason. I mean, so, I'm thinking a guy like Myles Jack right there. I mean, I'm cool with any of these other guys as long as they come in and they make an impact. I'm not, hard set on one guy. I love Treadwell because the idea of him and Dez is really exciting, and I think all of us in the fantasy football era kind of lean that way. But Myles Jack would equally, make a significant impact because of the presence of Sean Lee on the outside, especially if they lose Rolando McClain.
Yeah, it should definitely be said that, I do indeed have Myles Jack as probably my number 2 player on my board behind Jared Goff for the Cowboys. So, I completely see what you're saying about the linebackers. He's a special player. He's a guy that, this defense hasn't had along the front 7 in a while. A guy like Myles Jack who can do so many different things. So, if not a quarterback, I'd be completely fine with Myles Jack. I could see the Treadwell pick, but I really don't, I don't think I would fully endorse just taking a receiver at that number 4 spot because I think this is such a high, luxury that the Cowboys have to pick 4th overall. Hopefully they won't be doing so for years to come. I don't want them coming out of this with just a wide receiver. Even if it's a stud wide receiver, I think you already have pieces in place with Des Bryant and Cole Beasley and Terrence Williams to, at least compete at that position, and then you add a 2nd or 3rd round pick at that receiver spot. Right. This is a Dallas team that came away with 3 first-round talents in last year's draft. Randy Gregory was a first-round talent, Lyle Collins was a first-round talent, and then, of course, you had your first-round pick. So this is a team that had all kinds of talent. Byron Jones was a stud this year. And now you're going to, add a potential you're going to add, a player at 36 overall in the 2nd round, and you're going to add some free agents, hopefully. So I think they can afford to use the 4th overall pick on the future of the franchise and use every other pick in this draft on guys who will make immediate impacts, pair them with the first-round picks you got last year, and let's just assume the guy you get in the 2nd round this year is basically a first-round talent. That means that the 2016 Cowboys will have 4 first-round talents playing in their rookie or sophomore season.
5.
5. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say one thing. I got to take off after this comment, but if this Jalen Ramsey is as good as people are making him sound, I wouldn't have a problem taking him because Brandon Carr actually has 1 year left on his contract. He's signed through next season.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be him, Byron Jones, and if you can see Scandrick getting back healthy and at least playing at like 90% of what he was the season previously, you add Jalen Ramsey to that equation. That could be a scary secondary. If Brandon Carr, he needs to be cornerback 3 or he needs to step his game up if that happens. So.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see Ramsey playing in the secondary, and Jeff, if you're heading out, thanks for joining us here. Yeah, we'll welcome you back anytime here on the show. But I could see Ramsey coming into the secondary and competing. I just don't see a safety, at any point worth taking that high at number 4 overall, especially if a guy like Jared Goff is on the board. Yes, the secondary needs help, and yes, the receiving core could use a guy, but we're talking about a top 5 pick that the Cowboys really shouldn't have. I mean, if Tony Romo is healthy this year, we're not picking at number 4 overall. So we have this pick because of the play of our quarterback, so let's use it to address the quarterback position.
Yeah, RJ, I just want to ask one question about this quarterback situation for the Cowboys. Sean seems to really want a quarterback. You seem to somewhat disagree. I'm kind
baby
of
Romo,
at least in the first
Romo.
round anyway. I'm kind of on your side of that situation there. So I want to ask you, do you think the Cowboys should, to at least address the backup quarterback situation, draft a quarterback in a mid to late round or sign some sort of unrestricted free agent this season?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to not do so would be a failure. And, I've thrown around the term arrogance just in debates that, that taking a quarterback would be a sign of arrogance. Like, oh, we can compete without, the contributions of a first-round draft pick. To not get any quarterback, whether it's a first, second, third, whatever, 7th-round draft pick.
Are you drafting that quarterback just to say, here are Cowboys fans, here's
like
your
Connor
quarterback?
Cook.
Or are you drafting him to say, we took this guy because we feel like he can be the next Super Bowl winning quarterback for the Cowboys, which I don't think you can say about anybody outside of, Goff or Wentz.
I don't think it's necessarily that. I mean, when you draft, Jeff Swaim in the 7th round last year, are you saying we think this guy can be the next Shannon Sharp because we're drafting him?
Well, no, because he's your 7th round pick. You're saying we think he can be a guy that fits the mold of what we're looking for in our 7th round pick, which is a depth type player and that can at least contribute to some level.
And that's what I think they're looking for with quarterback. I mean, I agree that you have to have an eye on the future and you have to be alarmed by the 2015 season, but I mean, if you're planning for 2016, you're planning on using Tony Romo. So you're planning on this guy who can come in and play a handful of games right now. And that might be a little bit more irresponsible of a look towards the future than investing in a Jared Goff. But I think that's the plan right now. But back to the question, I think that they absolutely must get some kind of guy. I don't know if it's going to be Johnny. I know that's a really popular opinion, but I think the well's been poisoned a lot by him, and I think even Jerry knows the media storm that would be. I think RG3 is a more popular option or a more popular opinion anyway, from fans alike. And personally, I'd rather have RG3, but even if it's a Chase Daniel kind of guy, there has to be somebody to come in. I mean, you're kind of right, Sean, partly for political reasons, partly to show, like, look, we know Matt Castle and Kellen Moore aren't the answers here. I mean, they can't even win a game. You're talking their backup quarterbacks won one game in, 12 shots?
Yep.
So they have to bring in somebody who's at least capable of winning a game in the event that Romo goes down. And so to escape the entire offseason without the addition of any quarterbacks would be really irresponsible. Although we saw them last season leave the draft without a running back. And, we all went into that saying, okay, who's the running back they're going to get? Is it going to be Tevin Coleman or Jay Ajayi or whatever? And they didn't pick anybody. And the run game was fine. And I'm not saying this is going to work out similarly or anything, but I'm just saying sometimes we have no idea. But they need to get a quarterback as far as I'm concerned, one way or another.
Yeah, and just to kind of hit on a side note there, I definitely do think that they come away with one of these running backs in this year's draft class because I think it is a very talented running back class. There's definitely talent to be had in the later rounds, so I think they'll grab one of those guys. Last question for you, it's really a simple one as far as, evaluating these quarterbacks and Jared Goff being the guy I want in Dallas. So, you're saying you don't want him here, obviously, and you made a very strong case for it. Do you feel that Jared Goff, no matter where he goes, let's say it's the Browns or who else, the Niners, do you feel that Jared Goff is going to be a franchise quarterback for a team outside of Dallas?
I think he's got a shot. I mean, I think any guy who comes into this whole process with as high of a pedigree as he does, is capable of that. I know there's a knock on his hand size. It really doesn't bother me that much. I'm not a scout by any means, but I think the guy's got a lot of potential, and I think Carson does as well. And for what it's worth, I hope we get the best of both worlds. I've got a friend who's a big Texans fan, and 2 years ago, he really wanted Clowney with the first overall pick. And, I think at the time we all agreed with that, but he so desperately wanted them to trade back up to the end of the first, like the Vikings did, to take Petty or take whoever. And, personally, I'm really hoping that's the case we walk away from, after the 2015 first round, is we get, a quarterback, whether it's Goff or Wentz or Lynch or whoever, and an immediate impact guy.
Well, certainly a lot to still be sorted out for the Cowboys in this draft, a lot to figure out. Hopefully they come away with Jared Goff. If you're RJ, hopefully they come away with someone that makes more of an immediate impact. You heard his case there for Carson Wentz and some other guys. You can check him out, more of his stuff there at InsideTheStar.com. RJ, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. I'm looking forward to do it again soon.
Anytime. So that'll wrap up the spring debut here of Upon Further Review every Wednesday from 1 to 4. You can hear us next Wednesday, and until then, make sure to follow the show on Twitter right here at UFRWMSC. Saul Martin, John Galletly here with you. Tropical storms coming up next here on WMSC, and then you'll have basketball broadcasts after that, which I mentioned, coming at you live from Kean University. So until next Wednesday, Saul Martin signing off.